Hello everyone, my name is Crisoforo Lopez and today I want to talk to you about generic components and scalable single-page applications. Welcome back. So before we can start talking about scalable single-page application, let's understand one of the main differences between multi-page applications and single-page applications. So in the past, when our web application wanted to communicate with the server, we will execute a GET request to get an HTML response. Whenever we wanted to move to another page, we will execute another HTTP GET request and we will receive an HTML response. So this was a way of communicating with the server. But what happens with single page applications? Whenever our application wants to communicate with the server, this time we execute a GET request, but this time we're going to get an HTML response in the shape of a distribution folder, which is our whole application. Now, if we want to move between our pages, we will executing GET requests to get information, and this information is going to come back to us in the shape of a JSON object. Let's talk about scalable single-page applications. So let's say in our company, we have the need to implement a very big web application. And to do this, we're going to separate this big web application into smaller departments like admins, clients, orders, providers, warehousing, and sales. So one of the existing solutions out there is to separate our very big monolithic front end into smaller modules called micro frontends. For this, there are already existing frameworks like NX Narwhal that offer very good solutions for this separation. One of the issues that I see is that once we have separated our big application into smaller modules, if one of these modules has the need to keep growing and growing, we will have to refactor this module to separate it into smaller microphone ends again. This is in these kind of cases, there is a very good opportunity for generic components, and I will explain you why. Let's recap generic components. Generic components are UI components that can be injected with business information to produce UI components for that specific business purpose. We can reuse generic components by injecting different business information that will produce a UI component for that different business purpose. In the example above, you have one generic component being injected with two sets of business information, and it is producing two UI components for two different business purposes. In our project structure, we can place our generic components into a library that later we can publish into an NPM repository, from which our smaller micro front-end modules will consume the generic components from the library that is placed in the repository. Among the advantages of implementing this project structure is that generic components provide standardized solutions for all of our modules. We will have to implement this code, test it, and style it only once. Even if these components have bugs or need future enhancements, once we implement this change in a generic component, it will replicate throughout all the modules. Now, what if we add Redux to the equation? Remember that when our application uses generic components, those components are injected with JSON structures of business information. To implement Redux, we will also need to implement a UI API that will internally talk to the database. So now let's talk about how generic components and Redux help us with the scalable single-page applications. Now let's say we have implemented generic components in Redux. When we log in into our application, the first thing we're going to do is come to the landing page. And our code is going to ask Redux, do you have the structure of this page? And Redux is going to say, no, I don't have anything with me right now. So go talk to the UI API. And our code is going to go ask the UI API, hey, do you have this page information? The UI API is going to talk to the DB, and the DB is going to give back that information to the UI API. the UI API will give it to us, and we're going to use this JSON information to inject our generic components and build our screen. Now, we're going to get this JSON information and give it back to Redux. Redux is going to keep it with it. So let's say we're moving to another page. In that other page, we're going to do the same steps. Now, let's say we're coming back to our landing page, and then we're going to ask Redux, hey, Redux, do you have this page structure? And Redux is going to say, yeah, I have it with me. There you go. And then we're going to use that JSON structure to, again, inject our generic components and build our landing page screen. By implementing generic components in Redux, maybe at this point you can tell that a big chunk of our application, it doesn't actually reside in our project code, but it resides in the database. And that is very important for scalable single page applications, because it doesn't matter how big an application might be, 200, 300 screens. What is important is that our screens are requested and built on demand by the users. Well, that is all for today. Thank you very much for visiting the channel and hope to see you again. Thank you.